Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the What the Fantasy Football Show. I am Jim Day, a.k.a. the Fantasy Taz on Twitter, and we are a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network, 18 podcasts strong and still growing. We have a few more that we're going to add over the next week, so we're continuing to build. If you're out there, you got a podcast, you want a chance to get bigger, let us know. Maybe we can help you out. But first, I have to bring on the one, the only, the man, the myth, certainly no one's legend, but he is Mr. Tony Cincotta.
Hello, guys. We got an important show for you tonight. I've been lost in a lot of podcasts, and I gotta be honest. There's not a lot of good ones out there, so we won't name them or name names. But tonight will be a little different. Tonight will actually be important, something you could actually use to be successful in fantasy football. And we got Mike Blewitt along with us, Jim Day, and of course, every show is going to start out with Ben Roethlisberger, Drew Brees. What do you do in these situations? Well, here's the thing. Jim and Mike, I was thinking about this today. A lot of us listen to these podcasts prior to the season to get information on drafts. Then the season starts. Every week they tell us at the beginning of the week who to pick up. In the end of the week, they tell us to put in. Nobody tells us how to play the damn game, fantasy football, because I think it would expose a lot of people out there in this industry because they've never won anything in their life. So what I think we're going to open the show tonight with is how to play this game. And I think the biggest mistake people make is that fantasy football is unlike any other fantasy sport. When you play a season-long fantasy sport, I think fantasy football you play week to week. And this is why I'm saying that, is that people look at buys and you go into the season. If you take buys into account, you're a fool. For one reason, I believe if you have a team that you want to get everybody on different bye weeks, you're weakening your team each week. I rather have all my players on 1 week bye, take one loss, and then move on to playoffs there. But secondly, why I don't even consider buys is just what happened with Ben Roethlisberger and Drew Brees. If you're worried about you have too many guys in week 11 out because there's 6 teams on a bye, you're a moron, and you're probably not going to do well in this thing. You play this thing week to week and make adjustments as they come, especially if you guys are playing leagues with trades. Jim, what's your thought on that?
No, I agree with you, Tony. It's really not something I put a lot of work into or time into when I worry about when I'm drafting. But it is something, it's more something I pay attention to in best ball leagues. Just because I'd rather have more people every week than just that one big week take that loss. Because you could definitely do it with multiple bye weeks and have it work in that form and not really give up that 1 week. Season long, I get the thought process. You want to have your studs for, at least 15 of the 16 weeks. And if you take that one loss, it's fine. Just make sure it's not week 12 leading into that playoff run. You want to make sure you have that week covered. But the thing for me is what I see more people getting hung up on is once the draft is over and you're starting into the season, people get hung up over where they drafted somebody. Well, this is what he cost me so much. You know what? At this point in time, where you drafted him, what you paid for him, doesn't matter at all. All you care about is what's going on in the field, who's producing, who's not producing. And that doesn't mean you just go in and say, oh, this guy hasn't done anything yet, I got to throw him out. I mean, got somebody like a Mike Evans. You expect Mike Evans to bounce back, guys of that nature. But at the same time, you can't really be worried about what you invested in, where you drafted in him. If he hasn't been doing anything, sit him on your bench. Wait till he does something. Wait till this offense gets moving the right way. I get that, but don't drop him.
That's a great point, too. What Jim's saying there is that if you draft the guy in the first round and expect to get first-rounders in return, that's where it always comes, where we try to be aggressive and we're trying to be buying guys for 50 cents on a dollar. And a lot of times a smart fantasy owner will tell you to go pound sand, and that's what they should do. But that's where people always use the term buying low, and you don't want to fall into one of those things where you're the opposite what Jim says. It's like you can't trade this guy because 3 weeks in, you picked him in the first round, and you're not getting anything in return. Well, if all of a sudden he's only playing 30 snaps a game, Jim, you got to make a move.
And you do. You got to make a move. The fine edge is trying to figure out when to make that move. You want to give them a little chance to rectify their game, but if it's not happening after a couple of weeks, then there are definitely times you have to move on. We've seen quite a few guys that we expected to play highly coming into the season that have been, for want of a better word, busts so far. So it's going to be interesting. But when you're trying to sell low, you really don't get any kind of value. So with guys like that, especially guys you thought were studs coming into the year, I give them a little bit more leeway than guys you had as middle tier players. If they're not performing early, then they're ready to go earlier.
Mike, what do you see as one of the biggest things that fantasy owners need to do in season as compared to prior to the season and how the game changes?
So the one thing I would add to what you guys were talking about is right after the draft, Jim's right. The value sort of is going out the window. You're just looking for production each and every week. But also for people lining up buys or trying to get cute in that way, the reality is when you look at your team 1 through 16 for most people out there and you're evaluating it, the likelihood that you're going to keep even 75% of those players is extremely low. You're going to cut many of the guys that are drafted in the 11th round and further. So you're piecing it together due to injury, due to lack of production, due to other players outperforming them that you pick up on the waiver wire. So don't try to look at your team right after the draft as a complete picture because it's going to be a moving target the entire season. But to your point, what can you do in season? I think it's important to look not just 1 week ahead, but 2 weeks ahead, as some of your opponents or your team are going to be experiencing bye weeks. It doesn't necessarily have to be the player for this upcoming week that you're picking up. You need to prepare for future bye weeks or players that might be banged up for multiple weeks. So that's A. And B, as you run through the waivers every week, you may find that there's a week where you don't think it's worth that much money to bid on a player, or you don't think it's losing your spot in the waiver wire order. I think it's okay to take a week off if you feel like you're just making a move to make a move. So plan ahead, but don't be over eager. Like tonight, Tony, we're in a guillotine league together, and there are a ton of good players that got released from the player that came in last, DeAndre Hopkins, amongst them. But he also had Austin Eckler and Melvin Gordon. I think those guys are going to be overbid on, and I'm just probably going to sit on the sidelines for that.
Now, wait, Tony, one of the things Mike said about where you're drafting guys and where you're playing them and how you're playing them going forward struck a nerve with me. And it's really important when you get to this point that it's okay to move on with guys, but you don't want to do it just to do it. Yeah. I see a lot of guys that are making moves every single week. Let's drop this guy, pick this guy. Let's drop that guy, pick this guy. Calm it down. You drafted some of these guys for a reason. You don't have to exchange your whole team within the first 3 weeks.
I mean, it's good to pick up John Ross. It's good to pick up John Ross, but don't pick up John Ross at the expense of, to make it an extreme example, of Leonard Fournette because he's not delivering in the first 2 weeks. You have to be patient to some extent. There are going to be guys that bounce back, and John Ross may have the season that Tyler Boyd had last year, but I can't necessarily cut a guy on my team that I had high expectations for because John Ross had 2 good weeks.
One of the things I love to do is I love to look at teams that are on bye that might have players I want in waivers and actually pick them up the week they're on bye.
Definitely.
Because a lot of people just glance right over them because they have that bye that week. And you could usually get those players cheaper than waiting till the week that they actually come back.
One last thing I want to hit on what Mike said. Now, Mike, he was referring to a guillotine league where you have certain guys available. A Michael Thomas. I've seen a David Johnson in one league, Leonard Fournette, Austin Eckler in a couple of the leagues. Here's the thing. What Mike said is that he's going to stay on the sidelines because he thinks those people will be overbid. And I think that's the right way to go about it. But here's what I'm telling you. There can be other people in that league that think the same thing.
Oh, I have bids in.
Superstar player, you put in a cheaper bid or what you think they're relatively worth. Do not bid, because the worst feeling in the world is all of a sudden to see Austin Eckler go for $79 in $1,000 budget, and you're pulling your hair out of your head. So you got to cover all bases.
It's a good clarification. When I say on the sidelines, that's probably in a league where there's no money bids, but in something like with Eckler, I'm putting in a bid that I think is definitely a losing bid, if only because I'm scared of when Gordon comes back. I don't think Gordon comes back and isn't a part of the offense. And similarly, I think people are going to bid heavily on Gordon simply because they think he might take over when he comes back. So I put in modest bids on both. I'll get aggressive with DeAndre Hopkins and let the chips fall where they may with the other guys.
All right, so here's the situation. is that Melvin Gordon is definitely coming back this year. He's made it known he's not going to do what Le'Veon Bell. He's going to play football.
Yeah.
I don't know if the San Diego Chargers want him playing football for the San Diego Chargers. They were trying to get a first-round pick out of him. They're two backs of playing good football. I don't know if you bring him in and mess up the situation. So I think their demands might go down to a third or fifth-round pick or something like that, and you may see him in another uniform. But that being said, Jim, do you try to trade Austin Eckler before you get a situation where Melvin Gordon may come back?
Yeah, absolutely. I said he's a very good sell-high candidate right now. In most leagues, especially PPR leagues, he's the number 2 running back in the league. And no, nothing against the kid. He's played great. He's looked great. He's running well. He's catching the ball well. He's doing everything they want of him. But I do think when Gordon comes back, Gordon is still going to be the number 1 on the team. I'm not really in Mike's thinking where I think they're doing so well with what they have. They're not really going to let Gordon play. Gordon's been there too long. He knows the offense too well.
Oh, I don't think
he's done well with it. So I do think that Eckler loses a ton of value when Gordon comes back. The problem is, you want to walk that line and try and figure out what week is the best week to try and trade Eckler. If it's me, I'm probably waiting until week 4, week 5. But by week 5, I'm absolutely trying to move him, especially if he's still doing as good as he is now.
To clarify, I do think Gordon's a part of the offense when he comes back. If I stated otherwise, then I misspoke. But I do think I'd be more in your line of thinking. But I might just ride Eckler out. Honestly, I just ride him out.
He'll still have a role. I won't say
that's why. That's why I'm not looking to trade him unless I really get blown away by it.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. If he's the number 2 running back, even at that point, week 4, week 5, you should be able to get several really strong pieces for him.
See, I think there's a great chance that Melvin Gordon never plays for the San Diego Chargers again. He wants to come back and he wants to play. The San Diego Chargers are the cheapest franchise in the NFL for the last 30 years. If they could even get a third or fifth round pick and not lose production on the field, which I think their running backs are playing well, I think he's gone. I think he's going to get traded.
Well, then he's going to have value somewhere else anyway. So
yeah.
Yeah, that's what Tony's saying. Maybe bid higher for Gordon because he's not going to be on the Chargers.
Yeah, but we may not know that until like week 10.
Yeah. I mean, it could be week 10.
Well, no, it can't be week 10 for a trade because the trade deadline is before that.
Right.
When is the week trade deadline?
I'll check the exact date.
One of the things is that we're seeing more and more chirping from Melvin Gordon and about coming back and how he's going to play. And, Jim, that's no accident based on Jackson and Austin Eckler's performance.
Oh, no, absolutely not. He's sitting there saying, damn you, Austin. You're killing my leverage. You're killing my leverage. He, of course, wanted Austin Eckler to come out of the gate and fail as the main back there, and that's just not been the case. So it's absolutely hurting Gordon's chances of trying to get any kind of extra deal done.
So to clarify, Tony, it's October 29th is the trade deadline, so they will have just played. Say he comes back in week 6 when they play the Steelers. They will have come off the Steelers, at the Titans, at the Bears, and then the trade deadline is 2 days after that.
Be real interesting in Melvin Gordon's camp if the agent thinks it's important to come back and play 1 week before the trade deadline or not get on the field at all and see if they make a move. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go about that in fantasy.
He doesn't want him to play. He does not want him to play.
I would think the same thing because God forbid he ever gets hurt. Here's the thing, folks. We talked about strategy, and I'm going to ask one more strategy question to the experts. But if your team sucks or your team's on the fence, you can go take a leak, you can go take a poop, and if you're old school and you still hold that Playboy under the bed, I'm sure those pages look like crap by now because it hasn't been printed in a long time. You can go take care of that. Give us 5 minutes to talk to everybody that has a good team in fantasy football. I'm going to say the Miami Dolphins are the worst team that I've seen in the National Football League since the expansion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jim Day, you followed football a long time. Do you have any argument on that?
Well, yeah, no, I can't really, outside of the 0-16 Cleveland Browns, I think they were right up there with that.
This one might be worse. They can't even get in the end zone.
Worse. I think this is worse than the winless Browns team and the winless Lions team. The 2002 Texans almost got David Carr killed on the field. So I think they can throw their hat in the ring. But I really do think I have not seen a team try to strip down their roster in this capacity ever.
But see, that's exactly the point. This was by design.
Yeah.
And they're
It
doing
doesn't make
everything
them,
they want to be
it
doing.
doesn't make them any better. They are
No,
the
no,
worst.
it doesn't make them any better. But it was by clear design. And with that design, they have a ton of draft picks next year and the year after. They have a ton of cap room next year. So in 1 year's time, they could really make a huge dent with all these draft picks and with all that free agent money that they will have in turning this team around very quickly. So, sometimes you got to make that shot, take that shot.
Would
I
you
think
give them a better opportunity to turn it around more quickly than the Cardinals might?
wow. Without knowing who they would pick up right now, I'd have to side with the Cardinals. But Cardinals, I think next year, if anything, if everything else is clicking, next year everything should be about the offensive line for them.
Before I bring it back to a fantasy perspective on why I brought up the Dolphins, I'm going to ask one question though.
Yeah.
And this is profound. How many players care about social issues more than they do about money, do you think? And the reason I asked that, Stephen Ross was actually on the committee for African American NFL players to dealing with the issues there based on the Colin Kaepernick situation, which was founded. And then he had to remove himself because he supports Donald Trump, and he was taking heat from some of the black players. So how many black free agents are going to sign with the Miami Dolphins?
If the money's right, I'm sure they will, especially if, once they see all the pieces they could put in place. I mean, it might take an extra year to do that, but I could see this team turning around is all I'm saying. They have done a good job of freeing up a ton of cash, and they've gotten a ton of draft picks. Whether they use them correctly is always the bigger question.
And for Stephen Ross, he does have hired a black head coach.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how it got to where it did with Kenny Stills involved in that situation.
Yeah, and they got Minka Fitzpatrick out of there as fast as possible. I've never seen a trade turn around that quickly. He was like, I don't want to be here. 24 hours later, see you later. You're in Pittsburgh.
I'm surprised they got a first-round pick.
I am, too. I am shocked. When I think about the trades in the history of the National Football League, Eric Dickerson was in his prime, went for a second and fifth-round pick. Marshall Faulk was in his prime, went for a second and fifth-round pick. Randy Moss was traded to the New England Patriots for a fourth and sixth-round pick. How the hell did they get a first-round pick from the Pittsburgh Steelers?
The market is the market. There's no doubt of what kind of talented player he is. He's a second-year player that lived up to his top 11 draft stats.
Well, the Pittsburgh Steelers lost their quarterback recently, started out 0-2. Yeah. That could be a top 10 pick.
Could be.
It could be, but wait, let's take it the other way. I actually had this discussion on the Frenzy today. Take it the other way. Look, Pittsburgh's defense has been playing quite well so far. Now you add in a top-level guy to come in and play safety for them just after they lost their starting safety. And, they actually moved this defense up a notch. And the reason I bring that up is because, look, they play in a division where there's going to be a lot of low-scoring games.
Yeah.
And that defense could keep this team in the competition for this season because they still have enough playmakers to be able to put up 17, 21 points. And with that defense playing really well, if Fitzpatrick really comes in and takes over that role and plays well, then that could keep them in plenty of games and give them a much better chance of winning some of them.
I'm a huge Fitzpatrick fan, Tony. So I'm totally biased in this, and not just because I'm a Steelers fan. I think Minka was a good acquisition. I understand the counter argument, but I think the Steelers will probably grind it out to be somewhere between 11 and 19, and that's where you would pick a guy like that, maybe even higher.
I thought you were about to say 11 and 5 as a
I like the move. I like the move, and this is the reason why I like the move. You just lost your starting quarterback. You start out 0-2. You can't have that team quit. And basically what they're saying is, hey, we got a good defense.
Yeah.
We didn't show it the first game. We're going to add a piece to that, and this season isn't over. I think it's a move they had to make to keep that team in the 2019 season.
They've been struggling at the defensive back position for a long time. Since Clark and Polamalu retired, they have tried to draft many corners and safeties that haven't worked out. It looks like Edmonds will work out. Davis had played well. Now they're trying to add another piece to it. With the amount of dime and nickel packages that exist in the NFL, they're playing base defense at 20-25%, most teams. Adding a guy like that could be a huge playmaker, I think says a lot about the future of the team that is going to be built around Watt, Bush, now Fitzpatrick, and more.
Yeah, good move. Now back to why we mentioned the Dolphins at first. We talked
Way back
about
when.
not playing ahead because of bye weeks and things like this. Jim, we're going to start to hear people talking about getting ready for the fantasy playoffs. We've seen some big offensive outings against the Dolphins.
Playoff.
Week 14, they play the Jets. Week 15, the Giants. Week 16, the Bengals. We're talking about 3-week teams. How many people should be out there getting ready for the playoffs and getting Jets, Giants, and Bengals?
Trade for John Ross now.
Yeah. Absolutely is the case. Look, somewhere along this season, they're going to surprise somebody. I just, it happens way too often for us to discount it. No matter how bad they are, get a couple of bounces go their way. These are still guys playing, well, some of them playing with pride and wanting to be what they want to be. So, there's going to be some place where they surprise everybody. Look, just go back to last year and Buffalo going into Minnesota. Minnesota's playing great. Buffalo's done absolutely nothing. Buffalo goes into Minnesota and just kicks their butt. Nobody saw that coming. And, it's going to happen somewhere along the line with this Miami team. But, man, you're right. I want to play pretty much everybody I can against them each week until they prove me wrong.
Mike, it's interesting to look at it. And you know what? You look at Le'Veon Bell, but there's actually some rumors that the Jets might try to trade him if they don't turn the ship around. You look at the Colts situation, and, of course, we know we lost the quarterback. But we got Marlon Mack there that can still run, and we got T.Y. Hilton that's getting into the end zone. What do you do? The Bengals situation, you've seen some, like you mentioned, John Ross, Tyler Boyd, Andy Dalton actually doesn't look bad from a fantasy perspective. What's your thoughts on actually trying to target these teams?
The Jets will have Darnold back at that point. The guy that I thought could conceivably have a good season with Darnold was Robbie Anderson. So maybe he's a guy that's just going to be floating around waiver wires soon because he won't catch anything for the next month until Darnold comes back. John Ross has obviously already been picked up after week 1, but maybe if there's a lull in his productivity, maybe he's somebody that can explode on a team like that. I understand what you're saying, but look, you can't wait around 12 weeks for these guys to have an impact. They have to have some role in the offense, but to your point, maybe you can buy low on some of these guys, even if they're a 5th or 6th wide receiver that you're stashing. Maybe you look for guys like that. And with the Giants, maybe if Ingram doesn't produce now, maybe he can against the Dolphins. And keep tracking, by the way, who does better against the Dolphins. Backs, receivers, tight ends, those are all components to evaluating that as well. I'm with you. I really think this is the worst team we've seen this century. I think they're worse than all these other teams, even if it was by design. And it's going to take a while for Flores to get anything done. Fitzpatrick and Rosen will both be disenchanted with this.
I got to say one thing, though. Today when I was putting together my weekly worksheet where I put in all the spreads from Vegas, stuff like that, I get to the Dolphins-Cowboys game, and I see Cowboys favored by 21.5 points. The money line is minus 2,500. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I don't remember seeing one that high in a really long time. Even last week's game was 19 and a half at some point, but 21 and a half. And I'm thinking, wow, this is crazy. The very next game I go to put in is the Jets-Patriots. Patriots favored by 23 with a minus 3,000 money line. I'm like, wow, back-to-back games. When was the last time we saw something that
Tony,
big?
I think those are the 2 largest spreads in 30 years.
Yeah, well, this is as shocking as it got. So I watched a lot of that Patriots-Dolphins game, and I immediately, when the game ended, it came to my mind, what's the line going to be? Cowboys-Dolphins. I thought 17.5 is what I thought. And I was shocked to see a line go to 20 in the NFL because both teams get paid.
Yeah,
right.
True. I will not bet. I will bet against the Dolphins and on the Patriots until neither of those things happen. I'm 4-0 so far this year, and I need them to prove me wrong, both teams.
I mean, the Jets, that situation, as the game went on, Falk was capable. I mean, he throws everything around the line of scrimmage. He didn't throw anything down the field. So that's the way it's going to be the rest of the way. but he was capable. I mean, at least they might be able to get 10 points, right?
It helps.
Wait.
It helps when Mosley comes back. That's going to be a big part of it.
Him and Quinn Williams.
Yeah, and even the other day when they beat the Dolphins, it was only 13-0 at halftime. I just think that game could play out similarly. Well, maybe the Jets have it. It's 17-7 at half, and then Falk is 3-and-outing it for the whole third quarter, and the Pats pile on in the second half. Before you know, it was 43-0 in that other game. I wouldn't suggest to lose by 40, but honestly, 38-14 or whatever, that gets it done.
It's a crazy, crazy situation.
Wait. This is how bad it is for the Jets. Right now, the Jets today signed David Fales to be their backup. So as of right now, their starting quarterback is, Falk, and you got Fales. But they were the number 3 and number 4 quarterbacks for Miami last year.
Yeah,
now
so
they're the 1 and 2 for the Jets.
Washington State dominating. Minshew and Falk both started.
For all the people out there, there's no mistake on the Falk and Fail situation because both of them know the plays, and that's the only reason that they're there with the New York Jets. Because Adam Gase, of course, was the coach of the Dolphins last year. It's all who you know.
Absolutely.
You're not wrong.
So that's where it's at. Well, of course, the quarterback news, we have Drew Brees and we have Ben Roethlisberger out. I'm not going to talk about the two backups. They are what they are, and I think we know what they are. But, Jim, how do you feel if you're a Mike Thomas or a J.J. Schuster owner? And secondly, if you're not an owner of them, do you contact the owner to see how they feel? And maybe you can get the guy on 50 cents on a dollar, and do you want him on 50 cents on a dollar?
I might take the shot on him. Look, Darnold swears he's going to be back for week 5. He swears he wasn't as bad as the media was making him out to be. He didn't lose 25 pounds. Sure, he felt really bad the first couple of days, but then he said, by this weekend, he said he felt fine. It was just that his spleen was so irritated that the doctors wouldn't let him play. But he swears he's going to be back by week 5. Now, again, like Mike says, who knows if that's actually going to come to fruition. But, hey, it's possible is all I'm saying.
Mike, what's your thoughts on Schuster with the Steelers and Thomas with the Saints? Are you going to go out and try to target these two guys, or are you going to go ahead if you're an owner and try to move them?
I think I'm more worried about Juju than I am Thomas, because Thomas is such an overwhelming physical presence. I think he could receive a Mike Evans style type of the offense, right, where they just force it by will to him, as the Bucs did with Evans in the past, pre-Chris Godwin. So I'm a little bit more worried about Juju. And why not poke around? I actually think Mason Rudolph could be more capable in his offense than maybe Teddy Bridgewater can be in his, but that's a close argument. And by the way, Sean Payton saying that they have two starting quarterbacks now doesn't bode well for Teddy Bridgewater, because Taysom Hill could take that job. They don't know Teddy Bridgewater anything. They're paying him a lot of money. He's got to earn it.
Yeah, that's what
exactly
worries me about the Mike Thomas situation, Jim, is how much Taysom Hill plays.
Yeah, right. The one thing we don't know about him, we haven't seen him throw consistently to get any kind of real feel for what his arm is like at this level. So that's a little concerning to me. But we also know that Sean Payton loves the guy because he's a jack of all trades and basically the Swiss Army knife of the Saints. So we could absolutely have a quarterback by committee going here.
Didn't he throw that dime for a touchdown in the playoff game that got called back?
He has thrown a couple of really nice passes over the last couple of years, but, one pass at a time is really hard to evaluate.
I agree.
You know why I always liked Taysom Hill is he went to BYU, so he had no sex in college, and he was just studying the books and studying the plays. And I think that's the way everybody should go through college, Mike.
I like that you believe that. Also, tying it back to Darnold, you seem like a guy, and I say this with respect, that may have had mononucleosis at some point in your life. So I'm curious if you did in fact have it and what your treatment was for it.
Here's the craziest question. I can't believe you asked that question. The answer is absolutely yes.
Of course
here's what happened. my senior year in high school, our football team, all of a sudden they started weighing the kids and nobody knew what was happening, right? What happened was a couple kids got mono because we had a old guy that used to come to every practice and every game, and he would pour us water. He was reusing the cups. In our senior year, we had 17 kids miss a game because of reusing the cups and mono. But I only missed 1 week. I didn't have a bad case. They sent me home and told me to go to bed. And on Tuesday, the next week, I was okay.
We had a rule in place when I played in high school that you were not allowed to share. You had to have your own water jug, and you could.
The guy was 80 years old, Mike. He was trying to help people out. He used to show up, right?
He really helped out.
Yeah,
he sent Waltham to a 1-7 record
in
'88.
Cooler with an ice, right, in water, and he used to use like a pot and put it in people's cups. Like he couldn't even get a ladle; he had a pot that he would put in cups, and nobody thought anything about it.
Hey, we had a rule in our high school: there was no kissing allowed in the huddle.
Could you slap each other on the ass, Jim?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially in the showers, everybody liked that.
Oh, Mike, can you equate to any of this?
I think I've set up that topic nicely, and I'll remove myself from here on out.
And there you have it. You know, I'll tell you what, the San Francisco 49ers running back situation is interesting to me. And one of the things I find very interesting on FanDuel this week, the Moist Man is actually a higher salary than Matt Breida by $100. What's your thoughts, Jim Day, on the Moist Man, as I call him?
Well, I'm pretty sure you're talking about Raheem Mostert, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Look, he's a good player. He plays well, and the one thing we found out this week that they're pretty much guaranteeing us is that we are looking at a three-headed committee here. It's going to be interesting. I really liked Breida coming in. I did. I've been talking about him all preseason. I liked him even when Coleman was on the field. I thought Breida would take over. But if Breida's going to lose most of his goal line carries to Jeff Wilson, that kind of hurts his value a ton. So it's going to be really interesting. I think this is going to end up being another backfield that is just going to be so hard for fantasy owners to know who to start each and every week.
The Jeff Wilson thing was fascinating for fantasy owners as he came off the practice squad to get in the end zone, Mike.
Twice.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was a big concern of mine. Even though I put Breida into some FanDuel and DraftKings lineups, it was a concern of mine about Wilson potentially taking carries. In fact, I picked Raheem Mostert up in Scott Fishbowl, and I didn't play him. 36 points later, he's sitting on my bench. I mean, I happened to win it anyway, but I think that's just going to be a difficult triumvirate to figure out. Breida is the guy that you say you want, but they won't be in blowouts every week. So are they going to really go three-headed monster, or they trust Breida to pick up the lion's share in a closer game?
I'll tell you, it's one of those crazy situations. Monday Night Football, somehow we have the Redskins on Monday Night Football this week. I got to ask you, Jim, we talked about the wide receivers the last time, and we were like, who's who? What's going on here? And do we have any love? Case Keenum's actually not playing bad for this Redskins offense.
No, he's not playing bad. And Terry McLaurin, the rookie, has come out and shown right now he's their number one and playing well, getting a lot of targets and making the most out of it. I love the routes he's running. He's making some nice sharp cuts. He's getting away from press coverage at the line. Kid is playing some real good ball right now, and it's going to be interesting to see if this team does eventually go to the rookie quarterback who played with him in college, if that actually ends up helping him or not.
Mike, what's your thoughts on the Washington situation? Anybody else that's jumped out from nowhere?
Yeah, I'm bummed that I don't have McLaurin in Dynasty. I really liked him coming in. I thought the matchup was going to be powerful with his college QB, Dwayne Haskins, like Jim said. As far as other guys coming out of nowhere, I think it seems almost like it's getting even more complicated with New England at times. Josh Gordon has an off game when they score 43 points. Edelman is the one guy you can count on. The backs, Michelle is bad one week, good the next. I think, Burkhead obviously has some value. I think that's just going to get a little bit more difficult. I would say from an NFL story, and you can relate it back to fantasy, I'm seeing the oddest stories right now in that Jalen Ramsey will definitely play with the Jaguars tomorrow night, but is likely to be traded on Friday. Like, how do they know that already?
It's fascinating to me. Yeah, I have no idea.
Why would he play if they know he's traded?
I don't know why the Jaguars would do that situation, but anything in this NFL season is absolutely fascinating to me. Jim, that Jalen Ramsey situation is, I would like to see the coach and the player just go at it on the sideline.
It was close.
It was
You almost
really
had
close. Yeah, definitely. And it is what it is. I don't like every once in a while it's going to happen. Players yell at coaches, coaches yell at players.
Yeah.
It is what it is. It's a highly passionate game, and you get in the middle of it, stuff happens. But it's not so much even that. It's just he doesn't like the way they're using him. He doesn't want to play zone as much. He wants to play man on man, and they're not using him to his best skill level. And that's got to be frustrating. It would be frustrating for me.
What about the Dallas Cowboys wide receivers? We've seen Dak Prescott been lighting it up. We're talking about the Dolphins situation. Yeah. Of course, we're going to have a new number 2 wide receiver in that Dallas offense this week. Jim, who do you like?
Well, Devin Smith came out of nowhere and played pretty well. I think that's going to continue at least until Gallup gets back. They like this kid, and we're finally getting a chance to see what he can do at this level after a couple of years of having injuries keep him off the field. So it's good for him, and I like to see guys like this come back and still play well. And he had a good week too. I want to see what he can do going forward. He's got a couple more weeks to give a really good audition for possibly going to another team when Gallup comes back or something along that line.
Tony,
we'll have to see.
Tony, I'll throw one out because obviously they're all the buzz of fantasy football right now, but Marquise Brown, after having basically no preseason, exploding onto the scene like this and getting 13 targets last week. Now they play the Chiefs, the Browns, Pittsburgh. I think it's really interesting that he's come out and produced in the way that he has. And I think with him and McLaurin, the rookies being really productive up front in this season, I think is interesting.
I'll tell you, it is very interesting. And one of the situations that came up this week is Devin Singletary didn't practice today. We did see Frank Gore get double-digit fantasy points. Mike, could that be a sleeper for people that are hitting the waiver wire this week?
I think Frank Gore is only going to be that valuable with other people out. Nobody's really going to rely on him to be any kind of bell cow. But does it eat into Devin Singletary's productivity when he comes back because Gore is doing well? Remains to be seen. It's 30 carries, 88 rushing yards. I don't want to get carried away, but Frank Gore is the Duracell battery of the NFL. I mean, he's 36
he really
and he's
is.
still doing it. It's amazing.
Jim,
now,
wait,
one
week against the Bengals, Jim.
Go ahead.
1 week against the Bengals if there's no Singletary?
Well, I tell you the truth, I think I'd take a chance on TJ Yeldon first. I think he's going to be involved in the passing game. And, if you're in a PPR league, which is what we normally discuss, then I want the guy who's going to catch the passes. And that's probably not going to be Gore. Gore, right now, his value is tied to scoring. If he scores, you get a decent score out of him. If he doesn't score, you're still in single digits, almost guaranteed.
The Bills are going to be 3-0, Tony. They haven't played anybody yet.
3-0. They haven't played anyone, but all the games count.
Doesn't matter. That's right. You beat the teams you get in front of you.
All
play New England next week.
People will tell you, you play who's on your schedule, Mike.
Thanks, Tony. That's a good one. They play New England
next
week.
You kept it obvious.
See what happens.
We'll see what happens in New England. It's Mike Blewitt, Jim Day, Tony Cincotta, WTF Fantasy Football. You can catch us every week, and make sure you do. We gave you a little strategy today. We told you how to go all about being a winner. If you're listening to the show, you must be a winner, Jim, because we don't allow losers to hang around with us.
No, we absolutely don't, Tony. And all three of us have been doing this an awfully long time. And, we've all won at these contests. So hopefully these people take our advice.
Mike, where can people find you?
Find me on Twitter at Mike Blewitt. I'll be on In-Game Live certain weeknights throughout the season, and I'm on Sunday mornings, every Sunday morning on the Sports Grid TV network.
Jim, where can people find you?
Easiest place is on Twitter at Fantasy Taz, but like Mike, I'm on the Sports Grid TV network every Sunday morning from 9 to 10 with Joe Pisapia in the Roto Experts in the morning, and Monday through Friday at 1 o'clock Eastern each day on the Fantasy Football Frenzy with our friend George Kurtz and Chris Ventra. So come on out and check us out.
And you can find me looking through those sticky Playboys in Jacksonville, Florida, if you want to come help me find them. Tony Cincotta, WTF Fantasy Football. We're out of here.